If you've been following Reproductive Rebel for any length of time, you know that I have covered the entire spectrum of a woman's life. Now, in previous seasons, season 2, we looked a little bit more closely at how girls should be starting their periods. In season 3, we looked more at the pregnancy and postpartum journey. And now, here in season 4, we are taking a meaningful look at the perimenopause and menopausal journey. Join me this week as I sit down with Jo Visser and all of her fire in her belly, beautiful enthusiasm around the menopausal journey. And we talk about some myth busting and how to make these some of the most vibrant years of your life. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an East Asian medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women to live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your health, offering holistic solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. So we are in season 4 and we have talked about starting periods in a healthy way. We have talked about pregnancy, postpartum, and this season I'm feeling very called to have lots of conversations about perimenopause and menopause. And I couldn't start this topic with a more beautiful human than Jo Visser. Welcome to the show, Jo.
Here, Adrienne. Happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on. I had the good fortune of crossing paths with Jo, and we talked nonstop about aging in Western culture and the mindset around aging. And I was like, we have to record this conversation.
Yes.
So, welcome, Jo. Tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So, where to start? So, I have a background many moons ago in nursing. My passion, which led me to nursing, was I wanted to be a midwife. So, women's reproductive health has always been near and dear to my heart and to my cells. Didn't stay in nursing, ended up doing an English lit degree, of course. What else? And then went into teaching and have been an educator most of my life. And I'm sitting here in Quebec, in my hometown, and I've lived and worked in various parts of Quebec and then in the Middle East. And for a number of years, then I came back to my hometown and I'm a coactive coach. And recently I have become a human design practitioner. And all throughout that journey, it's still the fire in my belly is women's reproductive health. Except at this point in my life, in my 50s, it's like, okay, so looking at the other arc or the other side of the arc, and what is our reproductive health in terms of perimenopause and that journey, that transition from perimenopause to menopause, and then post-menopause, which is the rest of our life after we hit menopause. And so, the impact on if we take care of who we are in our perimenopause and into our postmenopause, like the impact of how we age and how we age healthfully and vibrantly and feeling empowered. Like my generation, my mother's lived into her 80s for sure. So I say my mother's generation, certainly our generation younger, will live 30 to 50 years post menopause. And so what's the impact of that? How do we see ourselves? What's our narrative? And so really, as we talked about, you and I spent a long time talking about aging in Western culture, particularly women's aging. And so how do we change the narrative? How do women get to change the narrative about how they see themselves in that transition and beyond? And how do they remain healthy or become healthier and feel empowered and vibrant and robust? So that's just my little passion.
Oh, just a little. I would say you mentioned this fire in your belly, and I'm like, yes, that's such a delicious way to describe it because I had that same fire around this topic and flipping the script about so many things that we accept as normal or we
Mm,
normalize,
mm,
and it's not normal.
mm.
And, like this whole idea, and there's so many memes out there about how like menopause is this horrific thing. Like I posted one kind of jokingly a little while ago about there's this gentleman and he's standing outside in the snow and he's telling his wife to lay down on the front steps because her hot flash is going to melt the ice, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we make jokes like this, but the thing is, those kinds of intense symptoms are normalized, but it's because we're not taught how to care for our bodies so
Yes.
that we can make a very gentle and ease-filled transition
Yes.
through this stage of our life. Because, like, one of the things that I absolutely love about Chinese medicine is they refer to this period of your life as coming into second spring.
I love that.
I do too. I get goosebumps talking about it. Like, it's such a beautiful way to look at stepping into no longer putting your chi, your vital energy into the giving of
Yeah.
life, but into the building of your life.
Yes.
And it's such a vibrant transition if you look at it that way.
Yes. And certainly outlook, mindset, as I said, what's our, changing our narrative or reframing our narrative and reclaiming our narrative is really important because there is the mind body connection, which doesn't rule out all the crazy ass shit that can happen in your body, from that, we like the changes that might start for some women in their late 30s into their 40s and then, into the 50s and beyond. And so it's really about actually addressing some of those myths. And you talked about some of the things that we experience as women, be it, menstruation or pregnancy or postpartum, perimenopause and menopause and postmenopause. It's that, the normalization of things. For instance, like, oh, well, incontinence. And that's just going to be, as you get older, you're going to be incontinent, et cetera. And there's a whole industry around incontinence pads. Now, things might be common, but
Mm.
it doesn't mean they're normal. Hot flashes, also known as vasomotor symptoms, are extremely common. However, Shirley Weir of Menopause Chicks would say, that's your check engine lights. That's your check
Mm.
engine light sign. It's time to get curious about our heart health, our brain health, our bone health, our genital, urinary health, our sleep health. You know, things start to shift and change, and we may have been ignoring a lot of stuff. As we were working, if you're raising children, and you're taking on. And so it's time to, ooh, we can no longer kind of push things away and just say, oh, that's aging, or oh, that's perimenopause. Or, the joke is, well, that's perimenopause can last, well, for a couple of years to maybe 15 years, depending. And as some man said to a friend of mine, that's a long time to be in a bad mood. And, and there is the humor around it. And yes. And also, we need to change the narrative.
Mhm.
And one way we can do that is really becoming curious about our health, becoming educated and knowledgeable of what's happening in our bodies and what those changes mean. And what does my heart desire? What do I truly want in this a second spring? I love that.
I love that too. And Chinese medicine has this really cool, like 7 year and 8 year pattern understanding. Men's bodies move in 8 year cycles, women's bodies move in 7 year cycles. And when we get to 35, Chinese medicine understands that we are being extended an invitation for that curiosity. Let's get curious about how we are spending our vital energy.
Yes.
Are we working too hard? Are we allowing time for mindful, intentional movement, rest, how we eat, all of these things? Because we can't sleep a 4-hour night, get up and do it all over again the next day the same way we could when we were 20. And I'm not encouraging that at 20.
No.
But our body can rebound better because we have more vital energy on board.
Yes.
And so by the time we get to 35, the body is going, hey, girlfriend, we are extending this invitation for you to really take inventory of the way that you are moving through the world. And
Exactly.
a lot of us miss that invitation. Now, this 7-year cycle thing, you can see symptoms 2 years on either side. For me, I didn't really feel that big shift in my chi until I was 37, almost 38. And then I was like, wow, I did a show and was a vendor and had a blast on Sunday. I came into work on Monday and I feel like I've been run over by a bus. Wow, that was not my experience before.
No.
And so I had to schedule in meaningful pause in order to not get sick, burn out,
Yes.
and all of these things. So now that I'm in my 40s, it's an even bigger question. So if you haven't honored the 35 mark, by the time you hit 40, because 42 is that next 7-year
Right.
mark,
Yes.
like that's when things,
Yes.
the rubber really hits the road.
Yeah. I'm just trying to do like 42 plus at 49. It's interesting that we're just having this conversation. I was saying, in my 30s, like I said, when I turned 30, it was the best thing I ever did. As we say in French, je pétais feu, I was farting fire. Like, it doesn't translate so well in English. I was living in Montreal, I was doing graduate studies, really incredible kind of group of friends, and Montreal was fabulous in those years. Then I moved to the Middle East just before I turned 40. And I thought turning 40 was even the bigger thing, that like even the better thing. Like my 40s were even better than my 30s. And I felt extremely potent in my 40s, living in the Middle East, teaching, traveling. I sailed through my 40s. Like in terms of, there is nothing called, like, I didn't notice any changes, only looking back in retrospect. And so from 40 till about 48, I was in the Middle East. And then I came home, I started doing different things, but I noticed things starting to shift and change really in my later 40s. And at the age of 51 and a half, I remember like the libido dropped. And I know I can tell you this, like your listeners will probably appreciate this. I noticed that I couldn't use a tampon anymore.
Yeah.
And it was just like, what the hell? Like, what the hell? And then intercourse became extremely painful. And it was like somebody had turned a light switch off. Like it was on a dime. And that's when I started noticing the shifts and the changes. If I look back to my last couple of years in the Middle East, in Bahrain, I had my first episode of anxiety.
Yeah.
And I thought, what is this? Tied to a breakup within a relationship that wasn't particularly significant in any way. And yes, I was heartbroken, but it was the anxiety. And it's only now looking back where I can kind of go, there were some markers. As far as hot flashes or vasomotor symptoms, maybe like that year that I was 51. And that's the other thing we're talking about, the myths and the stereotypes. First of all, they put menopause, that whole transition from peri to menopause to post, through to post, all under one kind of, it's like, oh, menopause, and that equals a hot flash, bitchiness, and insomnia.
Yes.
It's so much more than that. Those hormonal shifts and changes, like when the estrogen and when your progesterone, especially when the ass falls out of the progesterone, you get all kinds, like it kind of happens first and what those things are. And so the symptoms of low and rapidly declining progesterone. And then, of course, once you reach the menopause, the rapidly declining estrogen. And so having an understanding of when that happens and how that happens, is really important for women to understand. But even when our cycles are regular, like what have been the roles of estrogen and progesterone? And when those levels start to fall, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Even in terms of testosterone, as that level changes as well. So, and then cortisol, and like not just one thing. You can't sum up menopause as a hot flash.
Yes. Well, and we try to reduce it that way. Like, there's this list of things to dread that come
Yes.
along with this phase of life. And really, like, your experience of this transition often, or does, not often, it does. It completely correlates with how you've cared for your body and how you've nourished your body. So, like, some people get to 40 and go, "Dear God, what is happening to me?" Their cycle is starting to get shorter. They're starting to feel all kinds of emotional symptoms. And then by the time they're closer to 48, they're like in it with hot flashes and things like that. I've even had clients that have had hot flashes younger than that.
Absolutely. Yes.
But there are also women who, like, I've had clients who've come to me in their early 50s. So, right around the time that you were noticing certain symptoms had begun to appear,
Yeah.
show up and go, "I don't think I'm going through a transition yet. Like, I feel great and whatever. I want to start working with you though, so that I don't have any issues." And then, like, the very next month, so like I meet with them 30 days later and they're like, "I think I'm in it." And I'm like, "So what is it that makes you say that?" Right? But like, there's psychosocial changes that happen too. Like, there are scans that show that the brain lights up different as you're going through this phase of your life, and your brain literally functions differently
Yes.
once you've made this full and complete transition, because your hormones are affecting the way that your brain works.
Yes. Oh, I can't remember her name. She's done a TED Talk. She also appeared in the M Factor documentary, which is an excellent documentary. She's an Italian researcher, neuroscientist, who's doing work on what estrogen does in the brain. And so we've been sold a bill of goods by being told that estrogen and progesterone and testosterone are sex hormones. They're also brain hormones, they're heart hormones, and so again, this is kind of like conditioning or how society wants to look at women and aging. They say, sex, you don't do that anymore. You don't need that anymore. So what do you need those hormones for? Sex. It was just to, procreate, or when you were younger, to have fun, So what do you need progesterone and estrogen for anymore? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah. It's wild. But the thing is, like, if we really truly look at the vibrancy of women in this phase of life,
Yes.
they actually have more of a relaxed approach to being intimate with partner, because they're not worried about an unplanned pregnancy.
Exactly. And I'm going to add an and to that.
Yeah.
I would also like women to give themselves full permission and to get rid of the guilt and shame that if they no longer feel like being intimate or have lost that sexual urge or whatever with a partner, maybe not on their own, but that they can give themselves permission to, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's okay. I think so many women feel so pressured and so shamed and so guilty and just really upset about being able to let that go because they feel the pressure. I mean, I have to say I have a very understanding companion, and because we'd had a great sex life, and then, as I said, at 51 and a half, gone, man. And it's just like, I cannot do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a wonderful partnership regardless, and a really great sense of humor around it. I feel very blessed. A lot of women, it's interesting because society will say you have to continue to be sexually active until you're in the grave. Otherwise, there's something wrong with you. And at the same time, society goes, oh no, sex and older women, ooh, ick, like, so it's, so what do you want, folks? How are you going to have it?
Exactly. It's like yet another one of those juxtapositions that women find themselves in,
Yeah.
where like you see it through your entire life. You're
Yes.
supposed to be a lady on the street, but a freak in the bed. You're
Yes.
supposed to be sexually active, but if you're older, that's not socially acceptable.
Yes.
And yet, there are a lot of women when there's no longer a fear of pregnancy, and
Exactly.
you come into that, I know who I am. I don't give a shit about what anybody says anymore. I am a woman in my power, because that comes along with this phase of life too. Like you find your
Absolutely.
voice and your vibe in a completely different way, which is one of the gifts
Yes.
of this phase of your
Yeah.
life. Like the older you get, the less of a fuck you give.
Absolutely. I always say, I literally have fewer fucks left to give.
Yes.
And it's also true. It's like talking about our vital energy, right?
Yes.
So, in which direction do I want to use this vital energy?
Beautiful.
And I could look at my mom in her 80s and I would say, she's even more relaxed, in terms of her trust in something greater than herself. Like she's far more relaxed than I am. Like I'm more uptight about life. And my mother's like, ah. So it's, oh, yes. I can see how as we get older, we can allow ourselves to let go of certain things
Mm-hmm.
and also figure out what we're passionate about. But I also want women to also appreciate and understand that where they are is where they are, like just to appreciate who they are and to know that they don't need to feel alone, that they don't need to feel shamed, that they can reclaim a narrative, and their well-being.
Mm. And there's nothing wrong with libido being different
No,
and
no,
intimacy looking and feeling different.
absolutely.
And the way that they claim their life and live that vibrancy being different. And that all of those things are not only okay, but not just okay.
Yeah.
It's a coming home to essence self. And in that coming home, you come into alignment and right relationship with who you are. And that is health.
Yes, I like to think of it too as, I think my word for this year, I know we're kind of about New Year and the new year, but I've been using it more and more when I've been wishing people well for this next 365 days around the sun, is like a deep contentment. There's something solid and ça goûte bon, it tastes good, just like that deep contentment. There's something very peaceful about it as well.
I love that. What I was going to say is like in ancient cultures all around the world, there was a reverence for women who were older
Mhm.
because they held the tribal knowledge and they held the women's wisdom to be able to share with current and future generations. And there was a reverence. And I just think about even in my own family, I still saw a semblance of that. Like my grandmother was the keeper of all of the oral knowledge
Mhm.
around the family.
Mhm.
And when she passed away, my mom has mentioned on many occasions, because she passed away when she was in her early 60s, unfortunately, of breast cancer. And when she passed, it was like my mom's relationship with the rest of her family just kind of broke. And it wasn't intentional. It was just that my grandmother was the oral history glue that held everything together.
Yeah.
And women in general still kind of occupy that, being that connector in families and that transmission of familial knowledge. But like Western culture at this point is so focused on the fact that women are aging rather than being focused on the gifts that they are able to impart.
Mhm.
because it's that visual stuff.
Yeah.
And like, I love Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yes.
I've always loved her. She's always been a fierce, strong female character in so many of the like movies I've seen her in. But like as she has stepped into the aging process, she is my fucking hero because she just doesn't, she's like, I am not dyeing my hair. I
That's
am
right.
not Botoxing my body.
Right.
This is what I look like. I am an aging woman and I'm proud
Yeah.
of who I am. And she's beautiful.
Yes. 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 And she's also, I think she refused to wear makeup like to any of the awards
Yes.
ceremony. That's right. That's right. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love it because she's embracing
Yeah.
who she is and her authentic beauty. And
Yeah.
like, it's not trying to conform to any sort of beauty norms. It's been kind of interesting as a large percentage of the population is coming into this perimenopausal journey right now.
Huge.
Huge.
By as of this year, the Menopause Society, also known as the North American Menopause Society, 1.1 billion women will be in post-menopause.
Wow. I knew it was a huge number, but I didn't know just how high that number was. Yeah. So that aligns with how the industry is trying to shift because the industry is always capitalized on our insecurities around the
Absolutely.
aging process. And now we have these beautiful, strong people like Cameron Diaz,
Mhm.
like Jamie Lee Curtis, who are public faces that are saying, no, it's okay to
Yeah.
be aging.
Yeah. I look at Gloria Steinem, who's
Yeah.
she's pushing 90. Gloria Steinem is still active. Helen Mirren.
Oh, I love her.
I love Helen Mirren. And I love Jane Fonda. I know she's had the work done the whole bit, but she's been something else too in her lifetime as well. And but I'm just thinking, oh, I remember meeting briefly at a conference, Gloria Steinem years ago.
Oh, that must have been amazing.
It was like my superhero walked into the room. It was just somebody's like, is this like Spider-Man had walked into the room?
Yeah.
Oh boy. And I'm thinking, there's Gloria Steinem. Oh my God.
Wow. What an amazing opportunity. Wow.
So there are these role models, right? Like role models in their 70s, 80s, pushing 90, as well as 50s and 60s and 70s.
And because there's such an increasing number of women hitting this life stage, finally there is more information publicly aware because that was one of the things that I think my mom would be okay if I shared this. And if you're not, I'm really sorry, mom. I'm pretty sure she'd be okay with me sharing this. I remember when she started going through her menopausal journey, and hers came a little premature because she had a hysterectomy. I remember she got part of the way through it and she was so frustrated with all of these rapid changes that her body was going through, how she felt emotionally, how she felt physically, all of these things. And there was so little information available. I remember one of the things she said to me when I started doing this work is she goes, help people, Adrienne, like create information so that people know what they're dealing with. She says, so that they don't feel as hopeless as I do.
Yeah.
And that broke my heart. I mean, she also didn't have her mother either.
True.
And so, like, she just felt like she was on an island by herself, dealing with all of these changes and how they were making her feel. And I've talked to clients who've been going through this transition, and like sometimes you feel like you're having out of body moments where like your mouth is doing one thing and your brain is going, what? Why are you freaking out right now?
Yeah.
But you can't help it. It's just you're in it.
Yeah.
And it's part of the hormonal changes that are happening. But you have this little voice outside of you going, why are we having such a big reaction to this right now? This doesn't make any sense. This seemed like it was a really little thing, but your mouth is going, I don't understand why you can't take your own shoes up the stairs. You have two capable hands, right? So like when you start having those, you start feeling like, am I losing my mind?
Yes. Well, because there's so little information and because women's bodies have been taboo subject since time immemorial.
They're literally the final frontier.
The other,
Yeah.
anything around our bodies has been extremely tabooed and a whole lot of shame.
And now we take a break from our program for a special message. Beloved one, the time of activation has arrived. The ancient ways are calling, and the portal to sacred healing is open. If you've been feeling the pull to deepen your wisdom in holistic women's health, let me tell you about Rebel Rising, the 2.0 evolution of our practitioner training program. The Rebel Rising program is a sacred container for those ready to reclaim the lost arts of feminine healing. This year, we are offering two powerful paths of study: pelvic steaming, a deep remembrance of womb healing and energetic clearing, and sound healing, where vibrational medicine meets embodied restoration. If you feel the resonance, trust it. Classes begin March 26th, and an exclusive tuition discount is available through February 28th. The portal won't stay open forever. Enrollment closes March 24th. If you are ready to rise, visit moonessence.life to claim your space. The time is now. And now, back to the show.
So, think about when we had our periods as little girls, certainly growing up in the 1970s, 80s, you'd hide a tampon or a pad and you'd go can I go to the bathroom, please? And, and it's like this whole taboo and shame around our menstruating bodies. And then, you get to the other side and things like it could be vaginal atrophy, et cetera. But there's some like the brain fog, the forgetfulness. Many a woman goes, oh my God, am I getting dementia?
Yes.
There's a fear of that, or, all kinds of other scary things. I've got heart palpitations. I'm anxious. I'm dizzy. I've got these hot flashes, and they feel very alone, very isolated. They feel that scared or crazy or both. Am I dying? What's wrong with me? And a lot of like the whole weight gain piece.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you're not sleeping well, you're going to pack on weight, but also our liver function declines as we hit perimenopause. So we have to think about how we're eating and even how we exercise. There've been a lot of women who've been like going to the gym all those years. They continue to go to the gym, wonder why they're packing on weight, is because their body doesn't handle stress the way it used to.
Yeah, cardio.
Yeah, exactly. So it's pounding away. That's never been my problem. Pounding away at the, the treadmill or the weights or whatever. Make weight bearing exercise is very important for our bone health and muscle health and building that strength. But how do we need to be exercising now? Because we can't exercise the way we used to, because if you're going at it like the warrior, you're stressing the body. When the body becomes more stressed, it's going to hold on to that excess weight.
Oh, I started noticing that recently.
And I'd say my mother didn't talk much about perimenopause and menopause, because she'd say, I had a couple of hot flashes, but nothing like my mother used to have, she would say. However, my mother had insomnia. She did not sleep. She worried about the world, tossed and turned. Was, very busy woman, but yet, she worried about the world. She worried about community. She worried about family. She didn't sleep well. She might not have had hot flashes, but there are other things going on. And so in a way, it would see on the surface that she would have just kind of breezed through perimenopause and into menopause. But that's not necessarily what's going on. But she would say, oh, but in terms of weight, as you get older, the sands shift.
I like that. I need to remember that.
Oh, if I'd like to go back to my younger self, I've always been curvy,
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I wish I appreciated those curves more when I was in my 20s, 30s, and even in my 40s, because the skin was smooth, baby. It was smooth.
And the shift takes place.
And the sands shift. Yeah, but many women feel extremely frustrated. There isn't the information. Over half of women, when they do go to a doctor's appointment, leave there feeling dismissed and disappointed.
Yes.
And most of the time they went there because of either menstrual questions or menopause questions.
Mm.
So there's a whole, you would say, industry. There's a whole field of medicine that is lacking in terms of Western medicine. Like a few are starting to cop on about, okay, we need to really serve women and we need to understand what's going on and really shift the narrative around hormone health, shift the narrative around hormone therapy. It's all bioidentical, et cetera. Like more and more women, like, so I'm a Gen X baby. Gen X and millennial women are not going to put up with the shit that baby boom women and women of my mother's generation to put up with.
It's true. It's really true. There's been a lot more noise about it. There have been a lot more open questions about it. And I feel like it's forcing, and I actually liked the word choice of industry because there has been an industry that has been created around it in terms of incontinence.
Yes.
In terms of, like, I mean, because there are certain expectations.
Yes.
Even though a person who understands these changes realizes that it's the way the body is actually trying to communicate with you
Yes.
in terms of what it needs.
Yes.
There is an industry that is capitalized on essentially the misfortune of women not having that information.
Yes. What happens is, so say a woman perimenopause or even postmenopause, insomnia, or fall asleep but wakes up, cannot sleep, anxious, achy joints, goes to see her healthcare professional, if she has one, and says, I can't sleep, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, and I'm achy, like I'm achy. Now he might say, or she might say, oh, well, that's just aging, the lack of sleep, can't sleep, the shitty sleep and the aches and pains, it's a sign of aging. So he or she may prescribe something to help you sleep, an antidepressant and or an anti-anxiety. Hopefully would have the wherewithal to maybe might try some physiotherapy or whatever, but not addressing the source of the problem, which is diminished estrogen and progesterone. Like that's the source isn't aging and you're treating the wrong thing. You need to go to why are you feeling achy and painy and why are you more anxious than usual and why are you having such shitty sleep? And so women, we need to educate not just women, but also healthcare professionals to really understand
the root
women's
cause.
bodies.
I mean, that's fundamentally the difference, though, between Western approaches to care and like Eastern approaches to care.
Yeah.
Because as you were describing those symptoms as an East Asian medicine practitioner, I'm sitting here going, and that is yin deficiency. Like the way that you're describing it, I know exactly what I would give you for herbs. I know exactly what I would recommend for diet and lifestyle because those things are going to support this natural transition that is happening in your body. In the traditional or allopathic approach tends to be you have a symptom, here's a pill.
Yes.
And there isn't anything wrong with our body. It is going through a natural transition. Just like when we go through puberty.
Exactly. Oh my God. I remember this conversation with my gynecologist a few years ago when I, like libido and vaginal atrophy and that kind of stuff. And she was like, okay, but you're still getting your periods. I said, yeah. I said, they're kind of irregular. I might go several months and then I'll have one and then it might go for a couple, that kind of stuff. And she says, but you're 53. I think maybe I need to do a uterine biopsy. And I'm like, I said, I'm in perimenopause. I said, I'm assuming it's like puberty.
Yeah.
Like as I start, in puberty, our periods are all over the place. In perimenopause, it's the same thing.
Yep.
But because in her textbook, it said the average age of reaching menopause is 51 and a half. And here I am sitting in a rock at the age of 52 or 53. And I was just like, no, I don't feel the need to do a biopsy. Thank
Mhm.
you very much, which is quite invasive and very painful, apparently. I said, the women in my family were all like my mother and my aunties were all like 55, 56. So
Yeah.
when they stopped menstruating, so like, I ain't worried about that.
Yeah.
And before I take a biopsy, could we at least take a picture first?
Seriously. Well, and like Eastern culture, they look at it as the longer you hold on to your bleed, the healthier you're going to be.
Interesting. Yeah. Because they're saying, because that means thinking about your hormone levels are still pretty stable, et cetera. So
Mhm.
your heart's protected, your brain's protected,
Mhm.
genital urinary system is protected, breasts are protected.
Yeah. Being able to have a conversation around what to expect. So then you
Yes.
know when to sound an alarm.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, the check engine light.
Yep.
But these things are all kind of check engine lights. What we have now in human history, if I look at my mother's generation, is you've got a lot of people living a very long time,
Mhm.
mostly women, not necessarily with the quality of life. I always had to say, you have to take a look at our long-term care facilities. They are filled with women with osteoporosis. They've broken a hip, and that's kind of the last stop. Incontinence and dementia,
Mhm.
bone, urinary, and brain health. And the number one killer still of women, especially middle age, is heart disease, is heart attacks. So we are living much longer, but we're asking our bodies to continue to live at a certain pace
Mhm.
without those hormones that kept us intact.
Mhm.
So, in terms of like Chinese medicine, it's like, yes, of course, the longer you have your bleed, because you still have those hormones functioning. And so
Mhm.
it's like, so what do we do then? Knowing that this is what's happening in our bodies and in our brains and if in our cells, what do we do? Lifestyle, or like what are the things that we put into place so that we can live a long life of quality?
Mhm. That's it. It's quality.
Is quality.
Even looking at like cancer patients,
Yeah.
it's quality of life that they're looking for. And a lot of times interventions take some of that quality away.
Yeah.
You know,
It's about having choices as well. What are the
yes,
options and what are the choices? But you need the information. You need the
it,
right information.
exactly. And honestly, that right there is exactly why this podcast exists, because I wanted people to know normal versus normalized,
Yes.
and that you do have options and choices and considerations,
Yes.
and providing that education
Yeah.
so that people can make informed choices. If bioidentical hormones feel aligned to you,
Yeah. Exactly.
then it's good that you know the difference between the synthetic versus the bioidentical and how they respond in your body.
Exactly. And I mean, hormone therapy and it's just one little piece of, say, of that pyramid, right? Of how's your sleep?
Yes.
How's your eating?
Mhm.
How's your movement? How's your soul? And they're not separate pieces either.
Well, and as I was listening to your story about having your best years in your 40s,
Yeah.
that nourishment of your soul carried you so far in terms of not having some of these things creep in because you were living in alignment.
Abso-frickin-lutely. Really, really interesting. Because if I talk to my other women friends who've all lived as expats in various parts of the world, they will say it was a fantastic, invigorated, empowered life. Like, I mean, my mother used to say to me, be your own woman, be your own woman. I'm like, I don't want to be my own woman. I want to be my own woman, but I just want to have a boyfriend. And my mother's like, be your own woman, be your own woman. When I got on a plane and went halfway around the world at the age of 40, that's when I became my own woman.
Mm.
And I really stepped into, I would say they were my most potent use. I loved my 30s,
Mm-hmm.
but my 40s where I felt extremely potent, like, and aligned. And I am sure that's one of the reasons why I didn't. And if I speak to different women friends of mine and women friends of mine who would have been already in their 50s when they were there, it was very interesting. I don't know, maybe heat had something to do with it. I don't know. I mean, listen, I come back to the winter. You know, those
Yes.
blue zones, right? Okay.
They're all in warm places.
They're all on warm. Son, Dan Bootner tried to, wondering like, what's the magic combination in those? I'm yelling at the TV screen. They don't have winter, Dan. There's no winter.
Yeah, it's true. They don't. I mentioned that to my husband too, because we watched that Netflix special about blue zones. And it was so funny as we were watching it too, because my husband goes, "You say that." And then the next episode, he goes, "You say that." And I was like, yes, because Chinese medicine, its whole foundation was trying to find the secret sauce to everlasting life. Like they were trying to figure out how to extend the natural lifespan.
Yes.
And so it's like when I'm trained in Ayurvedic, Chinese, and Western materia medica. So when I work with herbs, like I pull from those three toolkits. And it's interesting because in terms of women's health, you find a lot of herbs in the Western materia medica because it was the toolkit of the midwife and the local town herbalist and that kind of thing, right? But Chinese herbs were all about longevity. And so I love using a synergy of the two. And sometimes I'll also choose Western herbs with Eastern energetics because it's all about creating balance.
Yeah, I was going to say it's that search for balance as well. And
Yep.
there's not going to be one thing. It's not a one thing or a one size fits all.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so, like, when people come to work with me, they're like, "Well, what do you charge for this?" And I'm like, "Well, my flat fee part is the initial intake because that's the same for everybody. But then from there, I customize it because every body needs different things depending on how much information they come in with. Because collectively, and I did a reel about this the other day, I took a section from a podcast where this hostess says that her period is different depending on which ovary it came out of.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
Oh, that's exactly what I said. And I was like, no, like PSA people, like, and I just like kind of ranted a little bit. And then I was like, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Like, I couldn't handle it, but it just highlights how little we understand. That's why I jokingly said that the women's bodies situation is literally the final frontier.
Yes.
Because not only do we not know how to create balance during our bleeding years,
Yeah.
but then as we're making these transition into our non-bleeding years, if we don't know it over here, we definitely don't understand it over there, and we feel even more disempowered.
Exactly. It's kind of like the simple, like, I don't know if anybody teaches. I mean, I'm sure there are some curriculum that still have like human biology, like basic physiology and anatomy, like in grade 9. And so like if we at least understand the roles and responsibilities of what certain organs do and certain hormones do. And so the idea is if we understand what happens in our bodies when cycles are regular, and then we'll have a greater understanding to know, oh, this is what's happening in my body now. It's the same thing. It's like give people the right information, right? I mean, look, social media is wonderful. We can get a lot of information out there and is getting a lot of information now, like menopause is getting a lot of airtime.
Yes.
Damn right. However, there's a lot of misinformation, right? And so it's just like everything else.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me crazy because, like, I had this grandiose idea at the beginning of my practice. I was like, oh, I'm going to create educational programming around the menopausal transition. And I have a class called Coming into Second Spring, but I was so excited about that, thinking, oh, I'm doing what I promised my mother. And, I'm getting this information out there. And then I was like horrified when I got crickets in terms of people
Yes.
engaging with it because they didn't even know the phases of their cycle.
Right.
And I was like, wow, okay, so I really have to pull back
Yes.
what I'm teaching people because the collective system has done such a disservice. And, you know, forgive me if I sound like a complete conspiracy theorist, but I think that they do it to control us.
Well, information or withholding of information or accurate information is a way to control the way to control people is by putting a lot of misinformation and disinformation as well.
Correct.
So, information is powerful. Knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Knowledge is power.
And, you know, we live in a very patriarchal oriented system,
We do.
and, you know, women are powerful. And that is scary to people who are in power. If you give them knowledge, oh no, what they're going to critically think.
Yes.
And so, now, and I love what you mentioned about like our generations, because we're both in that zone, we're sounding the alarm.
Yeah.
Hey, there is no information out here.
Yeah.
Hey, we don't accept that.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, I'm looking at some of the people that I work with and follow. They're doing some incredible awareness and information and really trying to get, the research information out there and the proper information out to women so they have greater choices. And like, I want women to feel empowered. I want women to, as I say, if they have a healthcare provider, feel that they can go in and ask that healthcare provider for what
Mm-hmm.
they need. I have to say, I mean, I take my hat off every time to Shirley Weir of Menopause Chicks. She's based in British Columbia, and she's been doing some wonderful work curating a lot of really good information, a lot of different experts from different perspectives, and the work of Dr. Sylvie Demers here in Quebec as well. Because there are people trying to move the needle.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of myths that need to be busted.
Oh gosh, yes.
And just like for women not to feel so alone, like anything that I've done in terms of, even as a teacher, creating a space, that safe space where people no longer feel alone.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute, when somebody else shares their experience, like I'm about busting through taboos and shame, because the minute somebody tells their story in that space, then other people go, I'm not alone. That's my story too.
Yeah.
And it shatters the shame, and it creates the space for people to go, oh my God, I'm not alone. Thanks, B.
I got goosebumps. There's so much power in what you're describing. There really is. And there's so much healing that happens because all through our lives as women, we experience and feel so much shame around so many things. And then, we're not working hard enough. That one moment that you sit down on the couch is when your partner walks in and goes, what have you been doing all day? And then you feel guilty, even though you've busted your ass all day long. You know what I mean? Like, we have all of these things that we feel shame around. And then we hit this stage in the aging process. And it is completely socially acceptable for men to show up with a 20-something.
Yes.
There's this taboo or stigma around a woman being with a younger man.
Yeah.
So like now we're like entering the zone of a whole bunch of other things that make us feel guilt and shame instead of just looking at us as vibrant, healthy people that want the same things.
Yeah.
Like, it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as a woman in my 50s, of course, we're sitting up here looking at who's going to be the next leader of the Liberal Party right after now that Justin Trudeau has stepped down for Justin. It's like a Greek tragedy. Anyhow, they're looking at the candidate who could possibly replace him. And there are some very powerful women who could possibly step into that role. There's also some very powerful men. You know what? They're all in their 50s. And so part of So I want to feel like empowered, like this is like the next stage, political opportunities, especially as women in our later years, political possibilities, et cetera, and step into larger spaces. Or I did say to Matt, my partner, I said, oh, yeah, they've got the Oxford degrees and the Harvard degrees, and they've done this. And I said, I managed to have breakfast today. So it's finding that balance of stepping into and yes, and also being okay with, I had breakfast today. Like I've enjoyed my coffee and I've shoveled the deck today.
Exactly. And not feeling shame
And
around
not
that.
feeling shamed because, I'm 50, going on 58. I should be running for leader of the Liberal Party. What have I done with my life?
Well, but it depends on what makes you feel alive.
Exactly. Like I've always been in the process of reinventing myself. And so like now the dream is a women's health center here in my hometown.
Oh,
And so, and that's slowly getting off the ground, like it's starting to move. There's feasibility studies to be done and all the rest of it. But it's like, that's been part of the fire in my belly is women need a space and access to support and to information and to services.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's big.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And so now, as you guys are listening to this conversation, you see exactly why I wanted to have Jo on, because her fire in her belly that fire is in my belly too. And I want to create that same kind of change for people. And so, I could talk to you about this for hours because I love your passion around this topic. I love just your passion and you in general. I think you're beautiful. And, what you were saying about what running for office, like, but some of these people have dulled their shine to raise families, or they've been in the shadow of a partner, or they've this or they've that or whatever. Like they got their degree and then they ended up raising their babies, so they didn't do anything with it. Like there's so many stories, and like this is maybe their moment that they're like, hell yeah, this is what feels aligned to me.
Yeah.
I've been called to public office.
Yes.
And this is actually something that I think I'm going to have Jo back, because Jo has a really fascinating background. And one of the things that she had mentioned when we were doing our calls and like, what are we going to talk about, was about human design. And I definitely I'm going to have Jo back. She has graciously agreed to come back for another episode. And I want to dive into what human design is more at that point. But like, this is kind of like, in astrology, you're midheaven. Like, what is it that you're called to do in this lifetime? And that's one of the gifts of menopause and postmenopause, is for a lot of reasons. There's a little bit of a, I don't give as much of a shit socially. There's more of a, I'm pouring life into my years, where you come into alignment with, what is it that I've always wanted to do that I haven't been able to do?
Yeah.
Either because I've been raising kids, or I've been in a relationship, or whatever it is that has kept you from stepping into this. Or maybe it's just been you doubted your ability. And then all of a sudden, menopause pulls that curtain back and you're like, fuck yes, I can do this. And I am magic and I don't care what anybody thinks. And you step into your power in this completely visceral, powerful, earth-shaking kind of way. I could totally see that with people who are running for these positions now, because they're like, and this is my time, man.
Yes. I think especially for women, like this is a very powerful time for women, and it absolutely can be.
I remember my mom was like, do you think it's weird that I want to go back to school? And I was like, no, not at all. And she took a couple of psychology classes because she always wanted to do it. And I'm like, that's the energy. You're pouring life into your years.
Yes. And it's a different, as I said, I love it. That's that second spring. And it's a different pouring, or a different, not if it's a different energy, but it's a different pouring.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so beautiful. I am excited about this phase of my life. And for so many reasons. One, I found my voice came roaring out of the closet, no pun intended, considering this is a podcast, in my late 30s. So as I was stepping into that energy, I
Yeah.
found, you know what? I feel like I've been really quiet for a long time about a lot of things. And my father even said to me at one point, "You've gotten really outspoken in your old age." And I said, "And I'm the healthiest I've ever been. Thank you for noticing."
Thank you very
And he
much.
didn't say anything.
Exactly. It's like when we have those moments in our lives, when we are aligned, when we are true to our heart's desire and or the fire in the belly, or and we'll talk about our human design, there is that vitality and vibrant and health. And it's like, yeah, like as I said, I felt fabulous in my 30s. I felt more vibrant and potent in my 40s. My 50s have been more of a, so what am I doing now and how am I reinventing myself?
Mhm.
So as in my later 50s now, I'm thinking, I'm looking at my 60s as to when, again, where I'll roar up again.
I love that. You're honoring the natural ebb and flow of the seasons. I
Yes.
love that. It's beautiful. So I want to honor your time, and I am so, so grateful that you have shared all of this wisdom and time with our audience. I'm definitely having Jo back. She is a beautiful ray of light. How can people get a hold of you, Jo, if they want to work with you?
Okay, so first of all, I might easily by my email. I'm a bit old school. My email address, I'm Jo Visser Coach at gmail.com. So that's JOVISER Coach at gmail.com. That's definitely where they can reach out to me for sure.
Wonderful. Any final thoughts as we close this episode?
This is always just so yummy. Like, the audience could probably see why we could just get lost spending hours talking with each other. And it was like that from the first time we met, like not even that long ago. And I could just sit and talk with you for hours. So I really love being in your presence, Adrian.
Oh, thank you so much. And I feel the same, my friend. I am so grateful that we crossed paths. Thank you
Yes.
so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience on this episode. And we will definitely do a part two.
We certainly will. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrian Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.